This talk, I want to focus on some a particular propaganda message directed at conservatives or the right, or generally speaking, now currently would be people associated with the Republicans or, you know, more traditional, etc. That that general camp of folks. And this message was propagandistically repeated in the latest issue of America's First Freedom, which is a magazine put out by the National Rifle Association. And the message that's on the cover and then repeated pretty much verbatim throughout the magazine and in different articles is that your freedom is on the ballot this November, right? They even have, like an image of the the president like crossing out the Second Amendment, and then in an interview, the person speaking for the magazine starts out saying in one part of the interview, clearly our Second Amendment rights are on the ballot in the election coming up, and then in a different article, highlighted, made bold, it's in the article, but then highlighted in bold, bigger letters. Clearly, our Second Amendment rights are on the ballot November 8th. So why emphasize this particular message? Well, because it's propaganda, and that's how propaganda works. They repeat it over and over, and they highlight it, and that's the main. When they want to get a particular idea in your head, they repeat it and they highlight it and put it in big letters, exactly like you find in this current issue of this magazine. So you might say, well, how is this propaganda? These Democrats are trying to undermine the Second Amendment. Well, that's just the surface level. You got to remember that the Second Amendment, along with other inalienable rights, unalienable rights, or you can say it either way, these rights are birthrights, right? They're actually pre-existing. You have them when you're born. They come from the Creator. Um, I'll just read from the Declaration of Independence here that men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Goes on to say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Well, you could, many people have believed that is the means to secure those rights. Other people, like myself, don't think so. But what I wanted to focus on here was just this particular message that your freedom, your God-given freedom, your God-given rights can be on the ballot, right? Recognize that is disempowering, right? Because then it's hanging in the balance, right? Depending on what these politicians do, you could lose your rights, right? But again, remember, these are God-given inalienable rights. So just because some politicians say, "Oh, I don't think you have that right," because look, I just wrote a new law, I just wrote a new executive order, or I just made a new emergency declaration, or whatever. It doesn't actually matter what they say or what they do, right? Like if a slave master said to a slave, you know, you belong to me, you're my property. It doesn't matter how many times the slave master says that. It doesn't matter if the slave master writes it down make some official looking document that says I am the rightful owner of this individual, it doesn't make it true. You see what I'm saying? So, likewise, just because some politicians may say, oh, you don't have the right to defend yourself or your family or, people that are around you because we just wrote some new words on paper, you know. We just typed up a new document here that says you don't have that freedom anymore. That doesn't mean that that's actually true. And this is actually what's most important to understand is it's the recognition of truth and it's the living by that regardless of what other people say, especially politicians. And that's why actually those that seek this control are so hell-bent on disseminating propaganda so widely in so many different channels, from magazines and of course the news, but entertainment, even advertising, like all these channels that you wouldn't even necessarily guess would be used to push certain disempowering ideas are. And why is that? Why is propaganda so prioritized? It's because what you believe is actually what's most important. And it's interesting, like crossover here, because you'll hear spiritual folks say the same thing, talking about like law of attraction and so on. They'll say, or just spirituality and psychology and therapy. They'll talk about actually it's your beliefs that shape your life, this recognition that what you believe is actually of paramount importance. But it's of paramount importance in a social context too. And they actually reveal that sometimes by what they say, because when they're frustrated with the current situation where they don't have the control they want, they might say things like, well, the problem is that these rifles are in common use. Or the problem is, like the people here just, this is what they believe, And so it's not actually a matter of what the current law is. It's what the people believe and what they practice, right? If you believe you have a right to defend yourself, and so therefore you carry a weapon and, you're ready to utilize it to defend yourself and to defend others, irrespective of what the current, political regime is talking about, that's actually what's most important. It's your belief and your action based on that belief. And so all the propaganda is trying to get you to change your belief so that you'll willingly change your behavior in a way that gives them more power. In this context, disarmament of nonviolent people, right? So just to conclude on this single point again here, if you're hearing anybody, left or right or whatever, talking about how your rights are on the ballot, you should just reject that outright and realize that that's what they call an externalization of power, right? I heard an interesting comment in an interview once with John Rappaport, and he was talking about the powers that be, and he was asked, well, what are they ultimately about, And he said, they're trying to sell you to you. I know that sounds kind of cryptic, and I had to, I was thinking about it myself for a while. I realized that that's a deep truth. So, to make it more clear in this context, if you were created with these unalienable rights to life and liberty, right? And if you are created in the image and likeness of God, meaning your spirit is actually a loving spirit, it's a good spirit, and it embodies freedom, right? Because God is pro-freedom, so he gives us free will. So if love and freedom are actually the principles of creation, and you are a spirit of that creation, you actually are love and freedom, fundamentally. And so they're trying to sell it back to you. They're trying to sell you freedom, even though you already are that. I know that might seem kind of esoteric or, overly philosophical or something, but it's worth contemplating. It's worth thinking about that they're trying to actually sell you something, or sell you something that you already are, or tell you that they can take away something from you that you are fundamentally, which is impossible. Your freedom isn't on the ballot. It's a God-given right, regardless of what they say. And it's fundamentally actually who you are. All right. I hope you found this possibly insightful and helpful. Thanks for listening.